Nothing in this program should be considered investment advice. It is for educational purposes only. Please hit pause and read this disclaimer in full.
Even if they slow it down because they feel like they can negotiate with Trump and we have more of a peaceful opportunity around the world, I still think from a long-term standpoint, that we may have some good buying opportunities in the near future.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this very special edition of Finance U. We are here in the morning of and the aftermath of the U.S. presidential election that just happened on November 5th, 2024. And you hear my voice breaking. It's been a long night. I didn't get a lot of sleep. Paul Kiker of Kiker Wealth Management, how you doing today?
I'm doing good, Chris. I'm doing good. I'm so glad that the results happen the way they are and we've got a clear winner. So hopefully we can move on to healing and getting some things done as a country now.
Well, it's interesting because when we talk about moving on and that healing, the markets wasted no time in saying what they thought about this. We see here the S&P is up 138 points on the day. That's just massive. And so you might think that's in the aftermath, Paul, for anybody watching this. Oh, once the results came in, I don't believe Trump was officially declared. We declared him a winner when we saw the results early on. But by the time NBC, ABC, and AP got around to it this morning, that's not when the markets took off. They started taking off here at 10 o'clock yesterday morning. So this is after just a few hours of polling. Somehow the market sniffed it out, carried on. This is the open market time. This is after markets just carried on with a big bonanza. So people might have woken up and thought the markets partied hard last night. They did, but the party started at 11 o'clock Eastern. How about that? What do you make of that?
It's amazing to me. The market had basically been telling us for the past 30 days anyway, with a little bit of caution to it, that anticipated a Trump win. And I don't understand how the markets figured it out that quick, or people were just speculating, but it's amazing to me. The markets are a good mechanism when it comes to that. They can get detached from reality and stay there for a while with government intervention, but they'll sniff out things like that because when people put money on the line, they've got the research and the connections behind them, I guess, to figure out what's moving. Well,
this is crazy. I don't even know how to interpret this. I'm just sort of throwing my hands up and saying algo's gone wild, because there's a lot of cross currents to talk about here today. We have the stock market. U.S. stock markets are up pretty hard right now, obviously. That's quite a big vault right there. When we look at where and how that is happening, kind of weird mix. Obviously, real estate not doing well. We'll talk about why in just a minute because of interest rates. There's something there I think people need to be aware of and watch out for. We can talk about it. Something really potent that maybe this is out of step with that or that's out of step with this. But we'll get to that in a minute. But I don't understand this, Paul. Look at JP Morgan up 10.3%. Wells Fargo up 11.6%. Citibank 8.5%. Bank of America up, call that 8%. These are huge moves. 8, 9, 10, 11%. What? How do we make sense of this?
I don't know.
Banks love Trump? I don't get it.
I don't understand that. I don't, unless the only thing that makes sense, and I haven't gone to take a look at the data to see if short sellers are just getting squeezed and they were hedging coming into the election. I mean, the positive sentiment is everybody remembers when he won. And initially in 2016, the market was down really hard, and then it reversed and ran like crazy for 2017. So the computers have learned on that historically. So, the assumption is that same thing's going to happen this time. And I do think that the path of least resistance is into the end of the year, unless we have something crazy happen. There's just not a lot to restrict the markets at this point. But I don't understand 10% moves in JP Morgan. I would normally say that's a short squeeze, but maybe there's just that much optimism in the algorithms. But with yields spiking like they have today, especially after the election results, doesn't necessarily make sense.
Well, it doesn't. Interestingly, we see a lot of not ebullience going on over in the healthcare sector. Of course, that makes sense with RFK Jr. coming in, putting a little beat down on some of these companies. And by the way, some of them deserve it from my perspective. And so not seeing a huge amount of excitement there. I can't find it on here at the moment. McDonald's is down, probably for the same reason. Maybe going to get squeezed a little around that. And but otherwise, it's big green. So we're seeing industrials up hard here, pretty good. Honeywell up a lot. What's that? 11%. I don't get all these. Could be short squeezes. I don't really know. There's Honeywell up 3.67%. But say Google's up, but Meta not really. Nvidia up hard, but Apple not so much. So this doesn't have like a consistent theme to me at this stage. I'm not really clear what I'm looking at right now.
No, if there's a movement to try to protect against the monopolies that are out there, I don't know. I don't understand a lot of what's taking place, and that's one of those things where there's several times the Fed has made decisions, and you get this initial reaction on the first day, and then it changes the next day, or the euphoria wears off. So I'm curious to see what happens over the next 3 to 4 days and week. Now, I would assume the path of least resistance is higher, but I wouldn't be a panic buyer here by any means at all.
Yeah. Well, it certainly was, I think, a surprising outcome to see Trump have such a commanding victory. I think everybody's kind of expecting a coin toss. Everybody I polled privately said, well, I think Trump should win, but you never quite know with how the system is engineered, shall we say, fortified. There was a lot of shenanigans going on. Obviously, there are a lot of things we could do as a nation to fix that and make that better. And I hope we take those steps because this is stupid, right? The reason you would put a machine in is to make things more efficient and quicker and more secure. And we get the exact opposite of those things, which means it was a bad business investment. We shouldn't do it, right? But leaving that aside, I think it caught people by surprise just how strong the response was for Trump. Given that, what do we know about Trump from a market standpoint? He's going to spend money.
Yes.
He's going to, be very friendly to, say, oil and gas drilling.
Yes.
He's probably going to put the hurt on tariffs. Importers are going to have to pay their fair share. I don't know what formula they use, but if you're dumping stuff in the U.S. market, I would expect you're top of list. You're probably going to get some trouble on that. So I'm not sure what we're looking at here yet, because I could make a case for the dollar weakening because, we'd imagine he would be a big spender, right? He racked up a lot of debt the first time around. So Interestingly, we did see an immediate reaction in this, which is the 10-year yield, which is kind of my proxy for all things interest rate. You can see here this that's a pretty extensive move right there, vaulting all the way from 4.266 all the way up to 4.478. That is a big jump.
That is a massive move.
That's a massive move. And let's put it in context. This is a longer-term chart, technical analysis. I know you spend more time looking at these than I do, but here you can clearly see that this is sort of the lower resistance line, and we have two upper resistant lines. The dotted line is a longer term, and it's above that, and obviously it's been above this shorter term upper resistance. Vaulted over that, didn't back test it, kept going. The point here, I guess, is that the person who draw this chart says, well, clear sailing, we can expect much higher interest rates going forward, which I think helps us understand if we wanted to, I mentioned it before, real estate. Getting kind of poked at here because obviously higher rates of interest not conducive for real estate investments. So what do you make of this?
Well, that looks like a bullish chart to me. And I would expect that yields are going to go a lot higher, and I would expect that that's going to put a lot of pressure on companies that have leveraged themselves too heavily. But I also thought that it was interesting. Consumer staples and several of your kind of inflationary hedges have been selling off a little bit, looking at some of the sectors where we are right now. So, if the market's anticipating all this growth right now, but you got real estate that's going to be struggling, that's good if prices come down and higher yields. But unless wages go up, that's still going to make housing, it's not going to change affordability in housing. So I'm curious to see how this is going to pan out. If wages go up, the economy expands, fuel prices come down, but there's still some inflation in the system. So my concern is, typically when you have rates go up like that, that tells you that growth is going to accelerate, but it's also inflationary concerns. So if that inflation still hasn't cleared itself from the system, which I don't think it necessarily has, then rates seem to be telling us that, yes, we're going to get growth, but we're also going to get higher inflation.
Okay, so I do think we're going to get more inflation for a variety of reasons, but let's complete this story real quick about what this means for real estate. So from the Kobayashi letter, who we've cited many times on this program, delinquency rate for commercial mortgage-backed securities loans, that's CMBS, now risen by 5 times over the past 2 years. Look at this spike right here. These are default delinquency rates here. We're back at crisis levels. This is the great financial crisis here. We're back in that territory. Obviously, rising interest rates don't help that. Commercial real estate crisis is real. I just don't see it anywhere in the stock market or bank stress. Like, banks ought to be getting slaughtered on this because they're the prime holders in many cases of the other end of these deals that are breaking down.
Well, and go ahead, Chris. I didn't mean to cut you off.
I was just going to say, like, when does this matter, do you think? Or
Well, I guess it matters if truth becomes reality again instead of obfuscation and narratives. So I would think that that's going to take some time. What I don't understand is why investors aren't paying attention to that, because with rates going higher, that puts more pressure on those that are already delinquent. And we're already back to the levels of 2008. That tells you there's a lot of weakness underneath the surface. What I'm more concerned about anything when I really look at this and say, okay, my job is to be, once we have a president, my job is to be an equal opportunity basher. We gotta hold him to the standard and what he tells us that he was going to do. That's my hope going forward right now. But at the same time, if we're going to be honest again, and we're going to get Elon Musk in there and RFK and Tulsi Gabbard, this whole team that's coming in, we're going to find out whether we've had this fairy tale picture and narrative. And that may not necessarily be as bullish as what we think in the short term, right? Because you got to rip off that Band-Aid initially. And I don't know. Maybe the market is already pricing this in and says Trump's a part of it. The economy is going to be so great that things are going to be good going forward. But I don't understand how investors are not running from banks. I wouldn't be panic buying JP Morgan with that type of delinquency in the commercial mortgage market, because that's not something that's going to change overnight. And if we're gonna have these tariffs that are going to encourage jobs to be here again, those are manufacturing jobs that we want to bring back. That's not necessarily going to help your office buildings. That's going to help your industrial parks, but not necessarily your major office buildings. So, that, just off the top of my head thought, there's more around that, but doesn't necessarily make sense to me. That's why I kind of want to see what happens in the markets continue this euphoria. And really between now and the end of the year. I mean, the markets tend to have this momentum. Once it grabs, it's going to carry for a period of time. And if we carry that through the end of the week and into the next week, we'll probably carry it into the end of the year. And then once we get into first quarter reports, we'll probably have a really good indication of what's really taking place under the surface of the economy and on these bank balance sheets.
Yeah, this is hard to interpret, because when we look here at this, we see the Dow Jones up here up 1,400 points, right? Yeah. 136 now on the S&P. NASDAQ 536. The Russell 2000 127. The Nikkei up pretty strong at 835. That's just at 2%. But the Euro stocks, you see, tried and gap and crap there. German DAX, same thing. Massive punishment on the VIX, driving that down a full 10%. That's astonishing. But notice Europe. This clearly, the story is Trump's going to be good for the U.S., not for Europe.
Yeah. How long has it been since we've actually seen some markets deviate from others? Normally it's
that's my point. Yeah.
Yeah, they're all going up in the same way. So reality's coming back home to roost right now. And look, the U.S. has been basically the only game in town as far as major market indexes compared to emerging and international since 2014. So if money starts to flee Europe over here, then these overvaluations of our market could very well, break records that we've had before. Not a prediction, just an estimate, because we have to be willing to play the game by the rules that are forced upon us. And
absolutely.
See, this is fascinating to me, and I'll tell you, and I hoped, but in no way did I really think that we were going to have a clear winner today. And Holly was like, "Are you going to stay up and watch it?" And I said, "No." And I felt bad for not listening to your joining last night and doing that, but I'm like, I'm going to wake up at 3:00 in the morning, and I know I'm going to look, and then I'll either be disappointed or awake. So I went on to bed, and it's just such a relief that we've got a clear mandate the way we do. And I know that means we still got to roll up our sleeves. There's a lot of work to do. There's a lot of things to get fixed. There's a lot of hard, which I hope and I believe with the teams around them, the hard decisions are going to be made. But hopefully hopefully this can bring our country together, because if we start to love the truth again, and his administration steps up and loves the truth again and has the courage to release the truth and just, accept the reality of what's really going on under the surface, then that can build integrity in investors again. We can invest with confidence instead of, having to play the game by the rules that are forced upon us, even though we feel nervous doing it.
Yeah, I have to confess, I'm very relieved and happy with this particular outcome. But I'm a huge free speech advocate, and I found myself heavily censored, shadow banned, and otherwise feeling a little bit like I was an enemy of Biden-Harris's administration, however that sort of came out. And worse, I had the strong sense that various government agencies, it wasn't personally directed at me, but I was on the receiving end of some of their same attention, where CISA, the DHS, the NSA, the CIA, the FBI, whatever, they turned their tools of administrative suppression on our own people, right? And we saw lawfare, and we saw all the censorship. It was starting to feel really dark, I'm not sure if we'll have to remains to be seen how this turns out with Trump, but at least I feel like we just dodged some sort of a bullet, which is fine. That doesn't mean we're out of the woods yet. More bullets coming our way, I'm sure. Right. But now we have some time, and I think we're going to have to use that time really judiciously to get our affairs in order, make sure we understand where our portfolio are, really analyze this, figure out where things are going, but a lot has just changed. And I find that in general, I'm very positive about that.
Yeah, and that me as well, and I'm curious, there are several things. Let me see if I can find, I think I have it here. Now, I'm a fan of gold. This is not a recommendation to any of the listeners out there. I do think that if we're finally getting a correction in gold prices, that it will be a buying opportunity in the interim period. But I'm really curious in watching gold. This is going to be one of these things right now where we'll have to see, because Zero Hedge the Marketeer put out and I like their charts on the Marketeer. They just kind of do daily reports and updates. So just to give them credit, you can see here this source from Refinitiv came out Wednesday, November the 6th. So I'm really curious what's going to see. So this is the 10-year yield inverted. Okay, so with yields spiking like they are, you can see they've dropped. Now, gold kind of ignored yields lower, and it's been bulletproof. We finally had a little bit of correction. So I'm curious to see if gold is going to start reacting to higher rates. One of the things that's amazed me over the past couple of weeks is dollar up, rates up, gold up. So I'm curious to see if those correlations are going to come back together. Don't know yet, but from a long-term standpoint, we may fix a lot of these issues, but there's still global forces that are in play. And I don't think it may slow down depending upon how Trump has to negotiate with trying to stop these wars that we're in. But the weaponization of the U.S. dollar by the prior administration, I think, set the BRICS on a path that maybe they slow down that path towards the unit and the development, but I don't think that they're going to turn around. You just can't, right? Even if they slow it down because they feel like they can negotiate with Trump and we have more of a peaceful opportunity around the world, I still think from a long-term standpoint, that we may have some good buying opportunities in the near future.
I would agree with that. I'm not clear how to interpret this yet, though, because this is a list of currencies here. And so you can see that the U.S. dollar is up a whopping 1.6%. That's huge in the world of international currencies. And we see everybody else, the euro, the Japanese yen, the British pound, we got the Canadian dollar, we got the Swiss franc here, the Australian, New Zealand dollar, all of them just got hammered. I'm not clear why Trump's getting elected would be so dollar positive and so negative for all these other currencies, unless you sort of had that view of tariffs or he's just going to trade protectionist this, and so all these other currencies are just going to get hosed. I'm not clear. I don't know. This is above my pay grade. I just observe. I don't know what those mean yet, but Trump isn't automatically dollar strengthening to me
No,
based on his first administration, but I don't know.
he's not fiscally responsible, or hasn't been in the prior administration. Now, maybe you can be a little more fiscally irresponsible if Elon does come in there and use business skills and cleans house. If you cut the fat out of the federal government, and let's just say 50% of the money that we're spending out there is just for lining pockets and political favors and trying to buy favor around the world. That dramatically changes our outlook, and Trump could still be fiscally irresponsible. I hate to say fiscally irresponsible because I've used that so much, but the reality is he's not necessarily been fiscally responsible in 2018, 16. So maybe he changes in the history, but if we can cut out that government fat and we use that to invest in our own country, then I would anticipate that would be dollar positive and economically positive, reinvesting back here, rebuilding our infrastructure, taking care of our citizens when something like the hurricane hits North Carolina or anywhere else, regardless of what state or affiliation you're in, whether you're a blue state or a red state, taking care of the American people. And I hope that's what they'll do. I really do. With the team that's around them, I have a lot of hope for that.
Well, this was an observation I had just sort of peering at his rallies and talking with people who went to them and what their perceptions were. I'm characterizing wildly, but a large mass of them, I would suggest, just had felt completely overlooked by prior administrations, that they didn't matter. They were called deplorable. They were called garbage. Obviously, these are the people who are really, honestly, the backbone of the nation. To characterize wildly again, a lot of the cities that vote so heavily blue, that's the Zoom crowd, the laptop warriors. These are people who have basically information jobs. And so on the other end, you would have the people who lived out sort of in the more rural areas, and they had what I would call the real jobs, because, you have to work with real stuff, all that. So as I watched that happen, my sense was, Paul, that these are people who voted for Trump because they just want to feel like they matter again. They have a seat at the table. Their concerns matter too. It's not just what Apple needs for, in the international space. There's sort of this globalist agenda with all the stuff they cared about that, frankly, deeply unpopular. Paul, I'd never talked to anybody who's like, yeah, you know what? We need more illegal migrants. You know what we need? I need less of an ability to understand what's happening to my child in school around, hormone sex change, indoctrination, whatever the stories were. Deeply unpopular, obviously unpopular at the voting booth. But what are you hearing now? Like I'm sure your phone's been ringing off the hook. What's the vibe there?
It has been. And for you listeners out there, I apologize. Normally, I have about an hour and a half just to kind of go through my Twitter feed, research on everything. And today it's just been phone call after phone call after phone call. And lots of joy. And here's the interesting thing. I think I had mentioned this. I've told so many people, I can't remember if I did it on our talk on the podcast or not. But there's a good 20 clients, individuals that came to me and said, hey, this is the first time in our lives we've ever voted Democrat. Okay, like we just can't support what's taking place, and they voted for Trump.
Democrat, you said.
Voted the first time in their lives they've not voted Democrat. I did say that backwards. Not voted Democrat. First time in their lives they voted Republican. And of course, once RFK came over, Tulsi Gabbard, they really started doing some research to see and listening to every interview they could with Trump. They're like, he's not who we thought that he was. So I had them call and they're like, we're so excited, but we're going to hold him accountable, make sure he does what he says he's going to do. I've had a couple of people call in that are just in shock. They're like, hey, this just seems too good to be true. I've had a couple that's like, should I liquidate everything today? I'm concerned that there's going to be lawfare between here and there. They're not going to. And I'm like, no, follow our rules. There's no reason to panic liquidate. Yes, we've got some things. So there's still some angst out there by individuals that are worried that because there's been so much lawfare in the past that we're going to see the same thing between now and the inauguration. But lots of joy and a lot of hope and a lot of just realization. I've had 2 or 3 clients say, hey, look, I'm going to reach out to my friends on the other side that got so mad at me, and I'm going to gracefully win and say, hey, just thinking about you today. I know you're disappointed, but we're all in this together, and we're going to roll up our sleeves, and I'm going to fight to make sure that, all these things that you're terrified are going to happen, aren't going to happen, in our influence. They're individually trying to hold our leaders accountable. So, and a lot of shock, a lot of discussion about the mainstream media is like the final nail in the coffin, because they absolutely blew it again with the polls, everything else that's out there. The well-known lies now with the Fine People hoax and throwing all this stuff, just the sheer amount of, one client said, the sheer amount of poo that they spewed upon the American people, trying to terrify them not to vote for Trump. And so all across the board, just a lot of really good conversations. And I had a couple of good conversations like, hey, I've had some projects I've been waiting on. I want to be prudent about allocating, but I'm ready to go to work now. So we started planning money flow and structure and, ladder and treasury, so that when they need those funds for the projects they're putting together come through. A couple other business owners or had a couple people in the wings that they wanted to hire employees with. So a couple more jobs I was told were going to be added today. So a lot of positive and exciting things.
Are you tired of feeling run down, maybe low energy? You've got some pounds you'd like to lose. Maybe you've got brain fog or something like that. Listen, we think we have the answer to all of that, and it begins with your food. If you're like me, you were shocked to hear testimony recently that unraveled and unearthed and exposed the idea that our food has been made addictive by addiction specialist scientists, the tobacco scientists out there putting things in our food. Maybe it also shocked you to discover that Europe does not allow all kinds of stuff in our food because they know it's toxic. What is the combined effect of all of this? Listen, we know what the data is. It's horrifying. The number of children showing up with type 2 diabetes, the total metabolic disasters unfolding across the land, marked by obesity, sure, but we have cardiovascular issues, concomitant rises in cancers, all of these things, and it all starts with food. Garbage in, garbage out. So what do we do about that? First, it begins with understanding the context. We've put together a very exciting, comprehensive food webinar that will expose the regulatory side of this and what is being done and why and how this happened to us. We'll be talking with Thomas Massey about that. We've got Dr. Ken Berry talking with us on the practitioner side and the solution side. We've got Tracy Thurman talking to us about the war on farmers and the war on food that has been happening. And Robert Barnes to help us to understand that as well. Many, many other guests to both define what the problem is and what we can do about it. And we want to make it as simple as possible. Here's an example. Tortillas. Hey, maybe you're even on keto and these are carb-wise. So these have low amounts of carbs. See that? Carb-wise. Yeah, these are carb-wise, so keto-friendly. I want to note something. You see how fresh these look? Yeah, you see any mold in there? Any bacteria, any yeast, any sign of anything, any organism in there? These things expired in June and it is now November. So, what are they putting in our food that even black mold won't eat it? I don't know, but I've decided that if it's not good enough for black mold, it's no longer good enough for me. Once you start down that path, you realize that we have got sugar and preservatives and salt and seed oils, all of the chemicals that are unnecessary, and the fact that the food pyramid is absolutely wrong. So if you like effective information that leads to effective action, this webinar is for you. It's going to be the usual thing that my team and I will put on. It'll be organized, digestible, easily understandable, and most importantly, it's going to be actionable in ways that you will understand what to do. And I've designed it so that you would easily be able to send this to anybody that you love or care about, say, can we talk about this, and have it as a starting point for conversation. But what we really want, we want you to be healthy because, well, who doesn't want to be healthy? Health is the number one form of personal capital you can have, of course. But given everything that's going on in the world, being healthy and vigorous and active are going to be dominant strategies and things you're really going to want to be carrying in. So, folks, it's time to get prepared on all levels. It begins here. It starts at home. It begins with our eating. And let's just make sure that we're not eating stuff that even black mold won't touch. With that, thank you very much for listening, and we'll get back to our regular programming now. Bye-bye.
Well, that's fantastic. I think Thomas Massey, who, by the way, I'm going to be interviewing soon for our food webinar in the context of that. I hope he's still available because I think he's going to be a busy guy. I think he captured it really well here today on November 6th. At the time of this recording, he said they tried to impeach him, silence him, convict him, and shoot him. Let's not forget that. Trump survived all of it, so they overturned their own election in a soft coup on President Biden, and he beat them anyway. We beat them. We must not squander this moment in history. The fight has just begun. That's the line I wanted to focus on here, because I do think the fight has just begun. We're going to have to be really cognizant of that. There's a lot of time between here and Inauguration Day. And then even after that, we saw already on CNN, they brought out some dude who said, oh, well, democracy happens between elections. When you sick the swamp against Trump, we'll tie him up just like last time, right? Yeah. So they're already talking about how they can undermine a presidency rather than saying, hey, this is who we got. How do we pitch in? How do we work together? How can we constructively move this country forward? What are our key priorities? Let's re-examine, because our priorities of transgenderism and rewarding men for being women apparently weren't the top priorities of everybody. So what are those? Let's do this together. There's none of that. They're already talking about how they can undermine, cut, and I think people are sick of that. I think they're going to try that for a little while. Paul, my sense is that we're sick of it. I'm sick of it, and we don't have time for that nonsense anymore. How do we move together productively as a nation?
Yeah.
That's what I'm interested in.
Well, and I had a conversation with somebody that's an extended family member not too long ago that is absolutely terrified of Trump. And we're sitting there having a conversation, and I asked permission. I said, can I say something that's probably going to hurt your feelings? Because I care about you, right? I said, and I'm not saying this just to hurt your feelings, but if you'll think about it before you respond, you'll understand the truth in it. And I said, you're worried about those things because you've had such a sheltered life that you don't understand what real pain and problems are, right? You can struggle over these things that are here. And of course, it upset them, and it took them a little while to calm down. But there's been a lot of us that are out there that are having to fight tooth and nail for government regulations and just constantly fighting off regulations. And I'd mentioned last time that I would have never been able to go independent in today's society. I could have done it if I'd have had access to deep enough pockets. But the cost of doing business has risen so dramatically and at an accelerated pace over the past 4 years that it protects those corporations and monopolies. So there are those of us that have had to fight in different ways and overcome tragedy in our lives or tragedy in businesses or relationships and the stress, or just the stress of trying to keep the wolves away. I love that song by Uncle Lucius, which is called Keep the Wolves Away. That's what we do for our families. That's what we should do for our country, right? That's what I do for my clients. That's what you do for your followers, is keep the wolves away. And so you're right. I'm concerned about the money Soros spent. All I could think of this morning is like, it would really be nice if we'd come together as a country, but all of the riots that took place from 16 on didn't happen, with the Democrats in control. And we know Soros funds a lot of those organizations. So, how are they going to respond? I don't think these people, especially if if the Trump administration is going to come out and pull back the curtains and, hey, we're going to release the assassination files. We're going to make sure that the Epstein list gets out there and the public's held accountable. There are a lot of secrets that I'm concerned that people don't want out in the public because it would be life-changing for them.
Yeah, well, and they should be, though.
They should be. They should be.
Yeah, I mean, it was hard for me because every time we had another celebrity come out in support of Kamala, the whole time I'm just thinking, are you on a P. Diddy tape, or are you on the Epstein list, or both? Right? And I know that's not fair potentially, but that's how I feel about it at this point in time, right? Is until we get that stuff cleared out, that's going to lurk there. So if I was in Hollywood, I'd be saying, you know what? Absolutely, unless I was on all the tapes, I'd be like, get those P. Diddy tapes out because we got to clear this up. And the people who are on them doing bad things, guess what? There should be consequences for that. Yeah. But at least now we can get the fog and darkness lifted off the rest of us, because right now it's kind of until I know better, it's a pox on all their houses. Like, until I know who's on the Epstein files, I just assume it's all of them.
Yeah.
All of them.
Yeah.
Right?
You have to, because it's not coming, and that's not bringing justice to the victims, right? And there are going to be people that are on those videos, I believe, that were slipped something in their drink, and then they do something compromising. They literally don't remember it, but now all of a sudden there's a video, and they're just not willing to lay it before the American people. There's victims all across the board when you have evil individuals like that. They're willing to. That have no boundary that they're unwilling to cross for their own personal agenda. So, and for healing in our country, we've got to turn from our ways. We've got to peel back that curtain and just experience the pain of what has happened behind, so that we can change and go forward, so that we give a better future to our children. And if we're willing to do that, then we're going to have a ridiculously bright future. And all of those that are terrified right now and crying because it didn't pan out the way that they hoped that it would, will wake up one day and realize, you know what? It was worth going through telling the truth for a change and accepting reality.
No, it's time. We had a long departure, long national nightmare of ignoring reality and telling lies. And I think we can get back now to maybe something a little bit closer to the truth. I'm hopeful. That's my whole, that's how I'm constructed. So maybe I'm just talking my own book, but I'm very hopeful that we can get back to that. I do think, Paul, the energy's there. People, we're tired. We're tired of being gaslit. We're tired of being lied to. Because, I just put this up on here. Let me just pull it up really quickly. Because I just did a whole piece on this. I just released today an entire scouting report for the whole world, so they could actually see the kind of stuff I normally do. But there were a couple of people that really captured it really well. One of them, Kim.com. And so just trying to summarize, like, why did this happen, right? Why was it such a blowout? And I think it's because of, well, let me pull this up. I think it's because of this. Rink. Here's this list of things, right? He says, look, they stole the election in 2020. They wrecked the U.S. economy, killed 1 million people in Ukraine, blew up Nord Stream 2, which I'm still salty about because that was economic sabotage of an entire continent.
Yes.
Leads to the next bullet point. They wrecked the EU economy, did a genocide in Gaza, set the Middle East on fire, lied to Americans nonstop. And I would also add to this, got us at the brink of World War III and conducted lawfare and turned its own state apparatus against its own people and broke the border, right? I could add more things. It was just like, nobody wants that, So that's what got voted out at this point in time. Now, that's going to have huge impacts on the market. I just can't figure it out yet. And I'm really struggling at this constellation of dots we've been looking at today. This up, that down. I don't know what to make of it.
I am too, because there's no clear correlation, except the U.S. is stronger than what Europe is at this point in time. So yields going up, that does concern me a little bit. Does that tell us inflation's out of control? Growth's going to be higher? Does that, energy prices going down? I don't know. We'll find out, and the information will come out, and there'll be analysts and experts that I trust that'll have something written on it the next day or two that are specialists in that area. But here's one thing that I think is important about what happened last night. I know I feel this way. The media did such a great job in their propaganda. Okay, I mean, there's times where I would have conversations with Holly, and I'm like, honey, are we in a feedback loop with people? Like, I know biblically, I've prayed about it, I've thought about it. I know we're standing on the right side, but are we that minimal in the population now? Because in all the media, outside of you and a few others, and the people that I've talked to, the wonderful people that I've been working with that we've met through our conversations here, through Peak Prosperity, they're all feeling the same way. So one thing that I woke up this morning is I said, you know what? I'm not so concerned if they pull something at this point, because one thing is clear. Nearly everybody I talked to still believes that there was some cheating in there, whether there was or not, but it was too big to rig, as they say. I mean, I've had too many people tell us it's too big to rig. And now on the other side of this, just the joy in every aspect of work, and there's people that are upset about it, but the realization that we're not alone. We're not the minority. We are the majority. I mean, popular vote was taken, at least last that I looked, unless something changed that we've come out here. I mean, this is just a clear mandate that says the larger majority, the majority of Americans done the right way, have said enough is enough and we're ready to change directions. And I think that gives me more comfort, because I was really concerned, are we to the point? Because the great fear in a democracy is you get to the point where more than 50% of the population votes to serve themselves at the expense of the nation, future generations, and those that are out there working. And that tells me we're not there yet. We're not there yet. And I think a lot of people on the other side have just been so deceived, right? They've trusted the mainstream media, and now, because they're so shocked, they had no anticipation that this was going to happen. Maybe that's going to be enough of a smack in the face for them to wake up and say, you know, maybe I need to question the way that I see the world. Yeah. And like you said, your definition of integrity, I love that definition, that they'll pursue the truth. Like that's in my Hall of Fame of quotes, Chris, just so you know. I love that.
Yeah, and that quote again is, you are in integrity when you stand ready to be completely re-educated at any moment in time. And so yes, let's get back to the truth. And so we could really do this positively. I just was really feeling before like we were careering towards a lot of negative outcomes. I really didn't like this pall of potential World War III. I saw these provocations, right? And, you know, maybe I do have my own sources of information, and they're just not what I see on the mainstream news. So there was a period of time, almost a year ago, Ukraine, air quotes, because I don't think they had the weaponry to do this, shot missiles to take out Russia's over-the-horizon long-range nuclear detection capabilities. That seemed like a bad idea. Poking your adversary in the eye so they couldn't see just gives them less of a time to react. It actually heightens the risk that you're going to have an accident that would result in a nuclear outcome. Bad idea. Bad for markets, bad for everything. So I didn't like that, right? Because I didn't know who was in charge. I still don't know that. Like, if right now U.S. Air Force detects inbound coming over the poles, you know, who's making the decision, right? It's not Joe.
No.
I hope. Certainly not.
No.
Probably not Kamala. Who is it? Exactly. Who makes that hard decision of whether to respond, and if so, how much?
If it's not them, and if it's not Joe Biden or Kamala Harris, and it's a no-name person behind the scene, that's terrifying, because they really don't have any accountability to the American people or to history, right? Because if you're the president of the United States and you're the one that has to make that decision, there is the accountability of having to answer to the world and to history and how your name will be seen. So that's why I think it's so important to have everything in the light, so that we know exactly how. We're infallible as humans. People are going to make mistakes. But at least if you're having to do everything in the light, and it's clear and it's honest and there's accountability, there's checks and balances in place. You can adjust course. It protects against that evil. Evil always operates in the shadows. Evil always wants to lie and manipulate. Good stands for truth and righteousness and wisdom. And we all know good when we have experienced it, right? And sometimes being good means, you know, we're disciplined and somebody tells us something we don't want to hear because they love us and they don't want us to head down a bad path. And they're willing to risk stress in that relationship because they want to keep you from headed in a tough direction. And, you know, I think that's one thing that we see, and that's why I'm so excited about Elon Musk coming in. RFK Jr. has been a lifetime politician, but he's had to be in the courtrooms and fight, you know, real world experience. Tulsi Gabbard's been in the military. She's been a politician, but Elon Musk and Trump, they've been in the business world. And right, it's not like other things. And I'm not saying, you know, we all have our roles, but in the business world, if you're not providing a product and service and doing what you say you're going to do, unless you're a monopoly, then you're going to suffer consequences really quickly. And if you don't make adaptations, you're going to be out of business. And that's where a government needs to be. We need business people in there.
Well, we do. A couple of things I would add to that. One, if you're going to be in a regulatory role, making laws and things that pertain to businesses, you would have to have owned or run a business.
Yes.
Like, you just got to know, making payroll, understanding value add, product supply chains, all of that. You just need to know. The second thing is if you're going to vote on anything that's going to lead to conflict or it's war-based, you got to have children, preferably grandchildren. I don't know where to draw that line, but you got to care, right? You know?
Yeah.
It's just the simplest thing. You show me the incentive, I'll show you the outcome. Humans are not that complicated. We tend to hew to our interests, right? Well, if I don't have children or grandchildren, like if I'm a Lindsey Graham, I don't have any tie to the future. I got nothing. All I got is my own ego and greed, to work off of.
Yeah. And there's no desire to leave a legacy for those that you care about, so we're tempted, I would be tempted. I'm assuming the average individual is to have a legacy of power. I'm going to do everything that I can to make as much as I can today. Right. So, and we've seen that in politics. I mean, that's just part of what occurs. So the interesting thing for us is I'm excited if we see things work normal again. There's ridiculous opportunities that are out there. I'm really surprised that technology stocks are taking off like they are today. Because now energy moved big. And so that's one thing that's been on our radar, which hopefully is technically given the all clear signal again, which has struggled for a while. And so I'm excited about that, which I can show. I like the first.
Yeah, this is interesting. So, I mean, this is just oil, West Texas Intermediate, crude, WTIC, but you see it got hammered there along with the dollar spiking, but then it just rallied right back. It's basically unchanged on the day. It's 72, give or take, but we saw it earlier in when we looked at this heat map here. You saw here, got to scroll down a tiny bit, get rid of this stupid ad. These are the energy shares down here. A lot of green going on down there.
Mm-hmm. Let me show you one of my favorites. Is and I really like First Trust. So, one of the things that we struggle with in the industry out there now is BlackRock owns everything. So it's hard to find an alternative. So First Trust has Brian Westbury. They let him say whatever he wants to say on Twitter. And I mean, I love following that guy. He's bright, he's wise, but this is the First Trust Energy AlphaDex fund. You can see it's up 5.7% today. It's not even where it was in March of last year. Haven't quite broken out of a downtrend, but this just gives you a good indication that there are areas that are undervalued out there that if we do get this economic growth by these new policies and deregulation, get the government off of our back, we may see more than this thin leadership that we've seen in the market. And that's where it's really enjoyable to me, because now all of a sudden strategies are working. Stop picking, and I'm not saying stop picking, but stop filtering, telling you what you can buy, and rotation and momentum. You can use it to your advantage instead of just having to rely upon, the technology connected companies that are wanting to censorship everything that we do.
Well, maybe they'll start changing their tune a little bit, because you saw before the election, even Mark Zuckerberg started to make noises like, oh, yeah, maybe we shouldn't have censored quite so much. He's just trying to he sensed the shifting winds and he was going to, get himself sort of curry favor and get on the right side. I see him as an exceedingly weak human being, if he even qualifies as human. He looks more robotic sometimes, but that he will just do whatever he thinks the authorities want him to do. He's got parental issues. I don't know what's going on with him, but I was really annoyed with his approach to censorship of people during COVID, like taking people who just wanted to form groups to talk about what they perceive to be their vaccine injuries, like putting bullets in those groups, like not allowing people to talk to each other, censoring people wanting to share their own personal experiences about things, right? Yeah. Because he thought that would curry favor with the administration.
Yeah.
I guess, right? That's a weak person.
That's a weak person. There. It really is. But I'll tell you what's a strong person. And look, no one's infallible, but I've always wondered about Elon Musk. Is he really who he says he is? What is he? When he purchased X, Twitter, and I'm like, that is not a good investment. I mean,
I thought $44 billion. I'm like, you overpaid, dude.
You overpaid for it, and he was talking to Joe Rogan yesterday. He was talking about, how it, it wasn't great for shareholders initially. But when in a world where everybody's trying to build their wealth in that area, and I want to be the richest person, he literally put his entire wealth on the line to buy that platform And I've seen there's still, I asked somebody in the technology industry, like, well, if he's that good, why aren't all these things fixed? And they're like, there's all kinds of programming behind the scenes that they're having to find and fix. Like, this is going to take some time to get it out. But that protected free speech. And if he had not have purchased Twitter and given us X today, I don't think there would have been many people that would have.
No, this wouldn't have happened.
It wouldn't have happened, and the mainstream media would not be forced to backtrack. So you had an individual that took their bragging, net worth level and was willing to throw it all away for the good of our country and the good of freedom and principles. And to me, that's what made America great, on the individuals that gave their life for this country to fight for freedom. And that's how we're going to have to live our own lives in our own businesses, do what's right, even if that means that we don't make as much money. I know you do that. I'm preaching to the choir right here now. But that's the important thing, and where we have to hold our leaders accountable. Great. We'd love to have some reinvestment back in our community from our representatives, but we don't want it just for the sake of putting money back in here. We want it to go to something that's going to make our country better and keep our debt down. So I'm just amazed at what Elon Musk did.
I've been wondering about Elon. Now I'm certain about him. I think he clearly operates very much shoot from the hip. But once he does that, he gets it done. I'm sure at some point, like people were sitting in a boardroom or in a meeting, and they're like, I don't know how to solve this. He's like, I know. I want to catch that rocket booster with some big tweezers. Make it happen. And they're like, dude, that can't happen. So now it happens, right? At some point, somebody was sitting in a room and they're like, hey, I think we can solve internet for the whole world. We'll just put satellites up there. And the people are like, you can't. You can't. And he did it, right? He sat down at one point and said, let's make electric cars. Nobody's doing it. Like, dude, you can't. GM hasn't figured it out. So what? And he did it, right? This is what I love about the guy, because I think I chased it down to the beginning. I think this is where it started. 2017. He just tweeted out, I love Twitter. And this guy, Dave Smith, I don't know who it is, said, you should buy it then. He's like, how much is it? Right? Yeah. That's where it all started. He just did it, and he just bought it, and he may be overpaid. But now Twitter, or X as he likes to call it, is the signal. It has more news signal than all the other news agencies combined.
Yes.
Combined. And they're going to have to figure out how they're going to react to that. They're going to probably try and circle the wagons and shame everybody and yell at people for not believing that they own the truth because they have better editorial processes, whatever. But eventually they'll come around to the idea that people vote with their feet, in essence. And Twitter is it right now. Reddit got just, oh my God. I put that on the live cast with Evie last night. That place, if you were just living in there, you were shocked and horrified by the outcomes. You had no idea it was coming, Paul. They were just, Kamala's ahead, women are about to vote, Puerto Ricans hate Trump. There was just like a never-ending wall, 100% in one direction. And they just got blindsided. So I went over there just to sort of like little schadenfreude, just to like see how upset they're pretty upset because they had no idea. They had no signal in their noise. It was all noise.
No, complete feedback loops, algorithms, tying them to people that have the exact same mindset. It's the worst thing we could do as a society. Open debate, free speech. And I mean, it is that important. It is that important. And so it's exciting.
Well, it is. And, you know, if this is how it started, this is how I see it. Right. Yeah. You know, I owe Elon a big debt of gratitude because he stepped up and did this crazy thing and overpaid, but now it's going to look like one of the best deals ever. But what he did was he rescued free speech and will let people actually do what democracies are really about, which is people to just speak what they want, and bad ideas don't go very far, but the truth has a way of just going further and further. That's what horrified the keepers of the game, right? The Washington Post, New York Times. What they hated was people daring to speak for themselves what they thought was true.
Yeah.
And that violates the whole expert class. Tony Fauci will tell you what you need to know about herd immunity, and Rochelle Walensky will tell you how many shots you need and when, and the Washington Post will tell you what's true. Well, none of that quite worked out, right?
No, it didn't. Hey, that made me think. Speaking of that and RFK, so the one thing that my staff said when they came in, when I came in this morning, is I had a meeting early and then did a local little thing. The first thing they said is "Make America Healthy Again." They are so excited about what they have learned and what you're teaching them. All of us. They're the most hopeful that I've seen them in a long time. So there are so many great potential things, and we're gonna have to continue to hold our leaders accountable, and I hate to say it this way, but if Q comes out and says, you remember when the QAnon thing came out, and I was listening to it, it's like, hey, stay at home. Don't say a word. We got this taken care of. Oh, no. Hindsight, that looks like a psyop to me. We have to speak our voice in kindness, hold our leaders accountable, keep focusing in the right direction, and let's all join hands and supporting this mandate, get together and make this country better for every one of us.
Yeah, I so agree. And by the way, it begins with each one of us, right? It's that awkward moment. Should I say something? Should I not? So I'm glad to hear you had sort of that hard but tough love but caring conversation with that person, right? Because that's the important thing to do here. We talk about Elon. Sure, he's got hundreds of billions or whatever, so he's operates in a different sphere than us, but he was one guy, right? And it's true, each of us has our own impact on the world around us, and so this is it. It's time to speak up. It's time to just say no to the BS. I'm really hoping we get a chance to. I kind of really hope that we have the Department of Government Efficiency, the DOGE. I hope we get that. I hope Ron Paul's part of that. I hope we audit the Fed, all of that. Because what I really want is some bright sunlight, some disinfectant. And I think if we could do this, if we could get the regulations, I'm just going to pick a starting point, cut back by half is a starting point. Mm-hmm. We would find that we would be prosperous again. Because what we have is we have an administrative class that just makes more rules. And they had the Chevron deference, which just got overturned, which was like the EPA's operating like a lawmaking body because we want clean air. Suddenly becomes all these rules with fines and penalties and even criminal action that they just sort of make up out of whole cloth. Like, let's get rid of that. I'm all for clean air, but it's got to make sense again, right? So if I was going to wear a bright red hat, it was make it make sense again, Mm-hmm. It's just time to get some of that back in because we're just administrating ourselves to death. We need small businesses, medium-sized businesses. We need to get rid of all that red tape. We need to stop big corporate lobbyists from making it impossible for small businesses to compete with them because competition makes us all better, right?
Mm-hmm. It does. It really does. And the problem with government regulations, my biggest problem, and I was teasing somebody the other day, said now that everybody's gone paperless, it means the government can stack 50,000 more extra pieces of paper you got to have clients sign for something because now they're not killing trees. But I remember a time in the past where you had responsibility to educate people about things. You had to give disclosures. You had to talk to them. And then all of a sudden it's a regulation. You got to have a piece of paperwork. You got to do this. You got to do that. What we could do for our clients and service and communicate, we fight hard for that. But we have basically two people that spend half their week just filling out paperwork for government regulations, pushing papers, right? That none of them make any sense. So if we get back to, let's have some accountability, disclosure, conversation, and get all of that out of the way, we can focus on innovation where people can come up with more products. Because if you're spending all your time filling out government regulations and checking boxes, your brain power is not going to innovation and better products and better service. And that's one thing Elon Musk is brilliant at, is coming up with products that solve problems. And that Starlink, I will say, Chris, completely off subject, but that Starlink, mm-hmm.
Yep.
I was going to have to run internet $7.50 a foot for 6,000 feet, I think it was, 7,000 feet. So at the time I had ordered Starlink, and I get the Starlink, I put it on the building, and a message comes through me from Starlink customer service that says, hey, just so you know, we don't have enough satellites in your area yet. They'll be there in about 9 months, so your service is not going to be great, but be patient. So my service was great. Few spotty places right now, the speed and quality of what's happening, and it was so much more cost efficient. We didn't have to rip up the ground for 7,000 feet, and it's easy to fix. I've had minimal problems with it. I mean, that's the innovation that we need. And of course, these portable Starlinks are absolutely incredible. That's a part of my prepping and bug out plan now.
Well, so I'm getting a Starlink Mini because it's very portable and you can actually run it off of batteries and things like that. So it fits into my plan. Paul, this is going to be my poor man's sat phone, right? Because I got signal on my phone. The cell networks could be down, but as long as the satellites are still up there and they can communicate, I'm thinking you and I could signal, talk to each other, use Signal, the app, for people who don't use it. But at any rate, I think it's going to operate like that. And then it'll be my redundancy backup just in case, Comcast goes down and something like that.
Yes.
So yeah, it's pretty astonishing how well it works, isn't it?
It is. It really is. It's amazing. And as you mentioned, I'm grieving all these satellite phones that I bought for all the kids, because you've got to pay for service each year. And I mean, don't get me wrong, that's there so we can communicate in case something goes wrong. But now you've got the Starlink Mini. It's like, you're giving me this product. You're not requiring me to have a 12-month service. And when you give people the freedom, you're not locking them in. That's great because I'm going to probably use it more than I would otherwise. But it's more affordable from a long-term standpoint because if I'm a person that really only uses it for emergency, I don't have all this built-in cost. So it's so customer service oriented. It's incredible.
Given all this, I still feel like it's really important for people to understand the importance of preparing and getting ready. And I know that when you talk with clients and so somebody comes in for an onboard or they're just, reviewing, you'll go through their complete financial picture. Mm-hmm. But if you find somebody, all they have is money and holdings and this and that, but they haven't, say, stored food or really sort of prepared in any way. Do you have that conversation with them?
I do. So it depends on the individual. There's some individuals that we have to do so much planning initially to begin with. They're exhausted by going through everything to get their plan in place. I'll usually wait till 90 days or, whenever we have a quarterly contact or something of that nature. But that's conversations I'm enjoying having. We're putting together, annual letters that we go out. Hey, here's some tips for putting things together, 3 months worth of food. I've had tons of conversations really in the past 6 months. Something changed in the past 6 months. Prior to that, I would talk to people about it. They're like, yeah, I'll get to that one day. But there was urgency for people in the past 6 months of moving in that direction. And I still believe that we need to continue to prepare. Just because, the elections come out, we've got hope, doesn't mean that we don't need to continue to prepare for that. But yes, I do. The basics, the check marks, the books, the supplies, all the resources that you have. And that's one of the most enjoyable things that I do. And they laugh at me because I'm probably one of the very few that do what I do that will have that conversation with people.
Yeah.
But it's important.
Yeah, it is important. It is important. Because as Thomas Massey said, the fight's just begun. We don't know how the blob is going to react and what kind of shenanigans it's going to pull. We don't know if there's going to be some desperate Hail Mary on their end to throw things into chaos and executive orders. This would be a bad time for a transition, because of this chaos that's happening that we just created. Or just simply that, this Treasury sell-off really morphs and picks up steam and heads out of control. Then we'll see what happens on that end. Who knows, right? But it's always good to be prepared. And I think that's my prime lesson from the Hurricane Helene, Western North Carolina situation, which is that in many cases, Paul, I'm still, I know it's out of the public eye. I know the media isn't covering it, but I still have Twitter feeds I go to, and people are like, it's still a problem. There's still people without homes. There's still people who can't get to their homes. There's still people, in need, and our government hasn't been there for them.
No.
So the lesson is, hey, when it really matters, you're on your own, right?
Yeah.
We kind of all knew that, but this shows in stark relief just how true that is.
It's self-sufficiency, and that's the important thing. It's like I tell, one of the most enjoyable things is when I take people through and I'm like, okay, you have X amount of dollars that you can afford to go pretty much do whatever you want to do. Okay, you've got sufficient margin for error. And here's some things: emergency food. You can get the freeze dryers. Some people have more resources than others. But be prudent with what you have, because if you don't have as much resources as the others, what I have noticed and I've heard for the people that are in those areas that had resources and had some preparations, they're able to be a blessing to others now. Very few of us, I don't prepare just for me. I don't want to be the only person on the face of the world that's sitting in the corner eating whatever food I have and I don't have human interaction. I'm doing it for my family first, and then to be in a position to be a blessing to other people so that as a community we can come together and come out. So it's important for those of us that have resources to make sure we're building a solid foundation for us, sometimes our extended family, and that's where we help get societies through and band together.
I agree. In closing, you want to hear my plan for fixing everything?
Oh, I do. Yes.
So I worked for this company called SCIC for a while, not on the scary defense contracting side. They had a commercial side, so I'm on the commercial side. And very Darwinistic organization. Every year you had a zero budget. You had to make these grand plans, go out and sell, and bring money back to the mothership. Every year, the bottom 10% of the company was let go.
Ooh.
And they had their various metrics for determining, right? But it was mostly, were you successful? Did you bring money in? Did you deliver? And that was the metric. So it worked, right? They had a very efficient organization. So could you imagine bringing that to government, right? And so we say, hey, listen, you're on the regulatory side. You are an EPA regulator. You're a whatever you are, right? However, this whole organization is going to be basically get a Yelp rating review from your customers, who are the people you're regulating. And the bottom 10% of you just get the axe every year. Right? It would improve so quickly. They'd call you up like, Paul, is there anything I can do for you today? Are you sure? Anything I can do. What do you need? I'm swinging by the dry cleaners. What do you need?
Oh, yeah.
It would change the whole dynamic completely, right?
And could you imagine when somebody did cross it, it's like they'd be telling everybody, look, here's the law. Y'all all know that this is unreasonable, and I'm having to drop the hammer on them, right? There wouldn't be any of this, well, this guy just pissed me off, so I'm going to let him have it. Oh, could you imagine how quick Social Security would answer the phone if you did that when you call him for help?
It'd be amazing.
That would be. Instead of going, hello, what is it you want? Hang on, I'm busy. That'd have been, yes, how can
Put you on hold.
Yeah, oh, that happens. So that's a great idea, Chris. I hadn't heard that before. So that's a really good idea. That would be great.
Yeah, if anybody who's public facing in the government, they have a rating, and it's how did the public score you, and that would be that. So
the only other thing that I would add to that is that any politician's sources of revenue should be made public for the American people for as long as they're in office. And then when they leave office, there's a lifetime ban from going into the private sector. Just give them a high enough pension where they don't have to go back. Mm-hmm. Well, not completely. There's restrictions on it. Maybe make it 10 years or
10 years.
That nature. Yeah, 10 years, right? Lifetime is not necessarily good. But I like that. Cut the 10%. Well, that would turn the government serving the people in a hurry.
Yeah, well, I told you, if I was going to run for president, I would only have one campaign slogan. You couldn't take me off of the topic. Consequences. They're not just for little people anymore. That would be the whole thing.
That's great. I like that.
That's my whole plan. That's all I want to talk about. No, because I do believe in incentives, and I just think they've been perverse for a long time, and the government started to treat us as adversaries in many critical respects, or they held us in contempt. Our voices didn't matter. And I really cut my teeth on that. Remember during the whole TARP bailout and the great financial crisis and all this and that, I was one of those naive people who still believed in his government and wrote a letter to my senator at the time, senators saying this shouldn't happen. And I found out that they got a lot of letters, and they were 90% against bailing the bankers out, and they bailed the bankers out anyway. So my voice and those of many other people didn't matter. Totally held in contempt. They're irrelevant to the way they look at things.
Yeah. So
And now, if I could put that on their 1 star, my senator, did not listen to me, right?
That would be good. That would, again, that would be the same accountability that the business world's having to experience.
Well, of course, of course, of course. All right. Well, Paul, you can hear my voice is just about to kick out. So sorry, everybody. I do have a cold. Colds happen still. It's an amazing thing. So I picked one up, but that's okay. It's just a cold. I'm actually reveling in it, Paul. I'm like, oh, yeah, because I haven't been sick in years. You know, it's been years at this point in time, right? Everybody else is struggling with their fifth time with COVID, and I've just been taking my vitamin D, and, you know, it's all been fine. But got a little cold. But my voice is just about to give out. So for everybody who thank you for listening, and thank you for being here. And for everybody who wants to talk with Paul and or his team, just please come to Peak Financial Investing, fill out a quick form, and somebody in Paul's office will get back to you to discuss your financial situation in the kind of depth you deserve. And it's a very comprehensive review. Paul, still getting just killer reviews from people who have availed themselves of your services and that of your team. So thank you for doing it.
Thank you. It's my honor. It's my honor. I enjoy the heck out of it.
I know you do, and it shows. All right, with that, everybody else, we'll see you next week. This has been Finance U, and please be safe and just do what you can to become prepared for whatever may come next. With that, see you next time.